The two killers in saddle discomfort are...
Finding a good saddle can be a nightmare. To shed some light on the subject, we've come to Bicycle in southwest London to meet James Thomas, an expert bike fitter with 15 years of experience, from all the way up to the pros, right down to amateurs. In this video, we're going to explain why too much padding can actually be a bad thing, how to find the right shape for your saddle, and why the most influential saddle of the past decade might be causing us all some big issues. All right, James, well, thanks very much for having us. Big picture question to start off with. How comfortable are we supposed to be on our kind of bike saddles?
I think there's a couple of things you've touched on there. I think to start off with, I think the first thing should be that it shouldn't be the loudest part of your awareness of your interaction with the bike. It shouldn't be painful by any stretch of the imagination, although comfort quite often has a time value attached to it. But saddle interaction or saddle discomfort tends to almost exclusively occur as a result of an asymmetric interaction with the saddle. But to answer your question, shouldn't really be uncomfortable at all.
So James has a really messy drawer full of saddles that he didn't want us to show on camera, but he did very kindly get out a few here. And I think one of the big things that's always got me about bike saddles is there's just so many bloody different shapes,
Yep.
right? And my kind of big question is why are there so many different saddle shapes? And what is any of this based on?
I think a lot of it's legacy led. So, you know, the saddle, the old Rolls saddle, the old Brooks saddles,
yeah.
Those older shapes from the sort of 70s and well, even and beyond, that's a shape that has sort of stuck. In more recent times, we have Specialized to thank for the introduction of the pressure relief channel, which is intended to relieve pressure from soft tissue in the perineum. And I think the short nose thing has certainly come about, well, mostly to defy the 5 centimetre setback rule that the UCI put in place. And, you know, again, I think we've probably got Specialized to thank for that as well, haven't we?
All right then, how about we get a couple of these saddles on the Bike Fit rig and let's see how it changes my interaction with the bike, if at all. All right, so this is the saddle I use. It's a Prime Primavera saddle that got from Wiggle before they closed down. It's a kind of Specialized power copy, basically. It's a short nose saddle, around 140mm wide. What do you think?
It's better than now.
You know, I don't really have any specific issues with this. James has a pressure mapping tool, maybe we'll find out.
All right, give that a go.
James is wondering why I never made it to the world tour right now. He just can't believe that I'm here on BikeRadar's YouTube channel rather than tearing up Strada Bianchi.
So much potential, eh?
And, you know, this is obviously specific Simon, quite a lot of pressure through the nose of the saddle. So the numbers, which you might not be able to make out at home, but the numbers of micro bars, the barometric pressure, there is twice as much pressure going through the nose of the saddle as there is to the left wing, but there's also twice as much in the left wing as there is on the right wing. So this sort of backs up why you get saddle sores on the side occasionally.
It's kind of, what's interesting about this is that before we came here, Felix and I were discussing, and I said if I think there's anything he'll pick up on, it will be this, because I kind of knew, like I said, if I ever get a saddle sore, it's in that point.
It's quite a long, reachy position, which is fine, but it can often have ramifications in the saddle.
So I used to ride on one of these back in the day. It'd be really interesting to see how it feels. It's a bit like rolling back the years. Yeah, you can definitely, I feel like I can feel it more in the middle. It's kind of interesting because you think, oh, it's not that bad, but obviously I've only been doing it for 30 seconds. And then you think, well, obviously if the pressure's that noticeable now, how would it feel after 4 or 5 hours? Okay, so that was really, really interesting. And now we can see with the kind of flat Arione here on the right, this little interesting pressure point that I had on my saddle, the kind of shorter, wider one, has disappeared from the front, but it's been transferred to the rear. And I feel like that's because I was having to rotate my pelvis back and sit back on it. Because I noticed as soon as I went down into the drops, that pressure, because it's just completely flat on the front of that saddle, there's no pressure relief or anything like that. You just feel it immediately. And now I'm wondering how I ever use the drops.
Well, the answer is you probably just arch your spine back and just sort of put up with it. I think this sort of backs up what we were talking about earlier in terms of these wider saddles promoting this gravitation to the nose. And the Arione is actually quite a narrow saddle. It's about 130mm wide across the widest point. And I sort of wonder whether that's allowed you, it's kind of giving you autonomy to kind of move further back and interact with it in a better way. but still, it's not quite right though, is it? Because we've still
No.
got a load of soft tissue pressure.
Yeah, not ideal. Okay, so we kind of got two almost extreme examples here, but I think one of the most interesting trends over the last couple of years, and you know, you kind of mentioned it there, that this is quite a narrow saddle, is that actually saddles have been getting shorter, but also wider. And I think the specialized power has been incredibly influential in this area because it starts at like 140 mils wide and goes up to like 168.
It's
You
like
know.
a ping pong ball.
How do you feel about width in saddles in general?
I mean, 168 millimeters, I don't think any skeleton is that wide. I think kind of it goes back to what I was talking about earlier in terms of the width of the saddle can very often have a negative impact on how the rider interacts with it because it doesn't allow the rider's thighs to kind of clear past the wings of the saddle. So when you do make a saddle excessively wide, it tends to result in this need to gravitate to the nose. I feel as though the width trend has been driven by, in my opinion, a slightly archaic measuring system, which in my opinion is the measuring of sit bones to try and make the sale of saddles feel more sciencey, like in a bike shop sales scenario. Oh, I get saddle problems. So you walk into a bike shop and they go, oh, we'll measure your sit bones and then we'll sell you the right width saddle. Well, the problem with that is it usually results in the saddle being too wide. I mean, we found using this system that we can reduce pressure going through the saddle by up to 50% just by putting arch support in the shoes. So saddle discomfort is a little bit more, or the cause of saddle discomfort is a little bit more convoluted than just different saddles.
Okay, but staying with this like width thing then, if we, you know, because this is a narrow saddle and we saw that, as you say, it potentially allowed me to interact with the back of the saddle a little bit more then. If you were, you know, if I came in for a bike fit, would you be thinking to me that actually like, maybe I want something like that's kind of, you know, has a pressure relief channel that this doesn't have, but I want something narrower than what I'm currently on?
Yeah.
Potentially.
Potentially, absolutely.
Should we try it?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the Sella Italia SLR boost underneath here, about 10 millimeters narrower, 13 millimeters narrower in fact, than the Prime saddle that I had on previously. So let's see how we get on. You know, it doesn't feel all that different, if I'll be completely honest, but obviously again, like first impressions are not the same as riding for 4 or 5 hours on something. According to the pressure mapping, I'm getting a more even spread of forces at the kind of rear of the saddle. So that's all good at the rear, but what we haven't solved is that big red spot at the front. However, James thinks that's nothing to do with the saddle.
This hot spot on the nose of the saddle, I mean, that can be driven, the fact that it's unilateral, it's on one side, suggests that there is a list of some description, as in you're sitting off to one side. But you know, it could also be as a result of the saddle being too far back, or the reach being too long, or the drop being too great, all of which will drive more pressure into the nose of region of the saddle. Uh, 30 millimeters of reach reduction influences. I mean, in this instance, 25% reduction in pressure through the nose of the saddle. I mean, this is still nowhere near what I personally would deem acceptable.
Yeah.
But there's lots of things that, you know, we could do that we're not going to get into today that would influence this interaction with the nose. The two killers in saddle discomfort are excessive saddle height and excessive reach, and these are the two fit parameters that either result in some sort of asymmetric interaction with the saddle, or they result in an over-interaction with the nose, both of which will cause you soft tissue issues.
So my question is, James, if I'm having pressure issues, why can't I just solve it with more padding?
The reason you can't solve it with more padding is because more padding usually serves as a driver to destabilize the pelvis. You don't want something that gives your pelvis autonomy to rock, because that's going to cause, again, a litany of issues, things like lower back pain, potentially some sort of issue with your feet as well. So yeah, you want a saddle that's relatively firm. Also, we all wear padded shorts, or at least we should be, when riding, you know, a sport bike and a saddle like this. But let's see what happens. Let's see if that red line on the pressure map increases. How does this feel, Simon?
So it's kind of like, I feel like I'm sinking into it a little bit. Like I can feel the pressure on my, you know, sensitive areas quite significantly. And I think like, you know, James and I have talked off camera a little bit about like saddle tilt. I think if this was my saddle, I'd probably be looking at tilting the nose down, which is probably a bad idea.
Well, it would get the pressure away from the nose again. There's a bit of a trend here, isn't there? Loads of pressure on the nose.
Yes.
But there is, in fairness on this one, there is an exact pressure. But to be honest with you, I reckon that is because the saddle is so soft, it's allowing that the sensors, there's 30 sensors in this pressure map, it's allowing those sensors to balance. And this is why you can't be blindly led by this.
Yeah.
I've been fitting with pressure mapping for about a decade now, and it is not the saddle selection system that it's touted as.
Yeah.
It's the best thing, the thing it's best at actually is proving what positional interventions yield. I.e., when we wind the reach down, does the nose come off the nose of the pressure come off the nose of the saddle?
One interesting thing I am noticing is I'm getting a real hot spot in my left foot, like on the outside.
And you've never had that before?
No, not like there.
That's interesting. I mean, I wonder again, it could be autonomy, the saddle giving you autonomy to sort of drift off the one side.
Maybe. Yeah, okay. Well, probably another issue for another day.
Where's that
long list?
worms?
Yeah, where's that long list?
You ain't seen nobody like this.
So assuming that I was going to go home now with the knowledge that I've got a whole litany of issues, like how much kind of like experimentation could I be doing at home without, you know, having disastrous effects on, say, like comfort, bike handling, that sort of thing?
Some experimentation, you know, without spending lots of money. Going out and just changing the saddle is probably going to not really yield great results, but ensuring it's relatively level, relatively flat, ensuring it's not too high. You know, if you level the saddle and that causes you genital problems, have a go at lowering it. That's likely to cause, it's likely to improve things for you. If you over interact with the nose of the saddle, have a go at knocking your stem length down 10 millimeters or 15 or even 20. But there is no substitute for carrying out comparative testing in a controlled environment where we can actually test different saddles and also the impact of positional interventions like reach reduction and saddle height reduction or increases. So that's the best way of going about it.
Right, well, guess my search for comfort on the bike will continue then. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. And of course, subscribe to James's channel. James, where can people find you?
Just type in BikeFit James.
And if you have any bike fit related questions, do leave us a comment, or if you'd like to just critique my riding position, please do leave a comment underneath. Thanks again for watching.